Phil Mickelson has won everything. 6 majors, a career Grand Slam, over $100 million in prize money. The Hall of Fame was a formality, not a question. But right now, in the summer of 2026, that version of Phil feels like a ghost. He has not played a single major this year. Not the Masters, not the PGA, not the US Open, not the Open Championship. For the first time in his professional life, he is absent from all of them. He has played exactly one official event, a live golf stop in South Africa, and finished tied for 48th out of 57 players. That is not a slip. That is a collapse. The sponsors left first. KPMG, Amstel Light, Workday, Callaway, American Express. One by one, they walked away. Then the fans stopped cheering. Then the invitations stopped coming. And now, something worse has happened. Someone inside his inner circle, someone who had been there for over 30 years, has walked away too. Here is my take. When a man who helped build your entire career decides to leave, you do not just lose an employee, you lose the last person who still believed in you. Do you agree, or do you think Phil brought this on himself? Drop your take in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to know who that advisor really is, and what he meant when he said, "I warned him," stick around, because that warning is the real reason this story matters. But before we get to who walked away and what that warning actually means, you need to understand the nightmare Phil has been living through this year. Because that nightmare is exactly why his closest ally finally gave up. It did not happen overnight. But when it started, it came fast. First came the money. In 2022, Phil signed that massive $200 million deal with LIV Golf. At the time, it felt like a victory, a middle finger to the PGA Tour and the old guard. But that victory was short-lived. The Saudi Public Investment Fund, the people writing the checks, announced they would stop funding LIV after the 2026 season. That $200 million? It is about to become a memory. Phil bet his entire future on a league that is now dissolving right in front of him. By 2026, the game had already moved on without him. He missed the Masters. He missed the PGA Championship. He missed the US Open. He missed the Open Championship. For the first time in his entire professional life, he played 0 majors. 0. His only official event that year was a live stop in South Africa. He finished 48th out of 57 players. 57th. That is not a legend slowing down. That is a legend fading into irrelevance while the rest of the world watches. His sponsors did not just reduce their support, they ran. KPMG ended their long relationship. Amstel Light walked away without a second glance. Workday did not renew his deal. Callaway paused their partnership indefinitely. American Express stopped using him as the host of their event. Every single major brand that once wrapped him in gold let him go. One by one, the doors slammed shut. The phone stopped ringing. Officially, Phil blamed family health issues. He said someone close to him was unwell. That explanation bought him some sympathy at first. But inside the locker room, the whispers grew louder. The real story was not about health. It was about choices. Bad choices. Choices that isolated him from everyone who once admired him. The health excuse became a shield, but shields eventually crack. Losing your fortune and your status is brutal. But losing the respect of the people who knew you best? That cuts deeper. And that loss of respect was about to become brutally public in a way Phil never saw coming. It happened at a private club in Southern California called The Farms. This was not some random public course. The Farms is exclusive, the kind of place where members expect privacy and discretion. Phil had been a member there for years. He played there often. He knew the staff. He knew the culture. In June of 2026, Phil showed up for a round of golf. Everything seemed normal. He walked through the clubhouse, said hello to people he recognized, and headed to the first tee. But before the round even started, something happened that would change everything. According to reports, a female staff member at the club accused Phil of unwanted and inappropriate physical contact. She said it happened just before his round. She went to her supervisor immediately and reported what had happened. The club did not wait. They did not sweep it under the rug. They launched an investigation. And here is the part that makes this story so shocking. While Phil was still out on the course, in the middle of his round, with other members around, club officials walked onto the course and told him to leave. Right there, in front of everyone, the round stopped, the game stopped, and Phil Mickelson, one of the greatest golfers in history, was asked to pack his bags and go. Golf Digest broke the story on June 11th. The headline was devastating. Phil Mickelson was no longer a member of the Farms Golf Club. His lawyer quickly issued a statement saying Phil had voluntarily resigned, that he had chosen to leave on his own terms. But the club's statement told a different story. They said they had taken decisive action after a thorough investigation. They said they had supported the employee throughout the process. And they made it clear, this man was no longer welcome there. The golf world has seen scandals before, but this one hit differently. This was not about money or contracts or which tour he played on. This was personal. This was about who Phil had become when nobody was watching. And for the people who had defended him through everything, the LIV move, the Saudi money, the battles with the PGA Tour, this was the moment they could no longer look away. Public humiliation is one thing, but when the man who had stood by you for 3.5 decades starts packing his bags, you know you have hit rock bottom. That man is Steve Loy. And to understand why his departure matters more than any sponsor or any tournament, you need to know the full story of their relationship. Steve Loy was not just Phil's agent. He was not just his manager or his business partner. He was the person who discovered Phil in the first place. Back in the late 1980s, Loy was the head golf coach at Arizona State University. He watched a young Phil Mickelson tear through the amateur ranks. He saw the talent, he saw the fire, and he became Phil's coach, mentor, and eventually his closest professional ally. For over 35 years, Loy was there. He negotiated every contract. He advised on every major decision. He stood beside Phil at every single major victory, all 6 of them. When Phil won his first Masters in 2004, Loy was there. When he won the PGA Championship in 2005, Loy was there. When he finally captured the Open Championship in 2013 and completed the career Grand Slam, Loy was the first person Phil hugged. Loy did not leave when the LIV controversy exploded in 2022. He did not leave when the sponsors started running. He did not leave when the fans turned on Phil. He stayed. He defended Phil publicly. He told anyone who would listen that Phil was being misunderstood, that the Saudi deal was just business, that the criticism was unfair. For 3 years, Loy absorbed the blows alongside Phil. He watched his client become the most hated man in golf. He watched the endorsements disappear. He watched the invitations dry up. But he stayed, because that is what loyal people do. They stay until they cannot stay anymore. Steve Loy had seen Phil at his highest highs and his lowest lows. He had forgiven everything, but there was one thing he could not forgive, because he had warned Phil about it years ago, and Phil simply refused to listen. The warning came in early 2022. It was just before Phil made the decision to join LIV Golf. Loy sat him down in a private meeting and told him the brutal truth. He said, "Phil, if you do this, you will lose your legacy. The PGA Tour will not take you back. The sponsors will disappear. The public will never see you the same way again. You are about to trade everything you built for a check, and that check will not buy back your reputation." He told Phil the move would destroy the goodwill he had spent decades building. He told him the younger players would not respect him. He told him the history books would remember this as the moment he turned his back on the game that made him. He begged Phil to reconsider. He pleaded with him to find another way. Phil did not listen. He signed the deal anyway. He took the money, he burned the bridges. And he told himself that Loy was wrong, that the fans would come back, that the sponsors would return, that he would still be Phil Mickelson, the people's champion. For years after that conversation, Loy kept his mouth shut. He did not say, "I told you so," when KPMG left. He did not say, "I warned you," when Callaway walked away. He supported Phil through the worst moments of his career, even when every prediction he had made turned out to be correct. That is what loyalty looks like. But the Farms incident was different. That was not a business decision gone wrong. That was a personal failure. That was a moment of such poor judgment that no amount of loyalty could excuse it. When Loy heard the details of what had happened, when he realized that Phil had put himself in a position where a staff member felt unsafe, something inside him broke. He had warned Phil about LIV. He had warned him about his public image. He had warned him about the people he was surrounding himself with. But he had never imagined he would have to warn Phil about his own behavior. He never thought he would have to sit across from the man he had known for 35 years and realize that he no longer recognized him. So Loy made the hardest decision of his life. He walked away, not with a public statement, not with a dramatic resignation letter. He simply packed his things and left. In private conversations with people close to the situation, Loy said the same thing over and over. I warned him. I did everything I could. He made his choice. If you think Loy was right to walk away, drop a comment and say so. And if you think Phil deserves a second chance, say that too. I read every single one. That departure is the final nail in the coffin, because Steve Loy was the last person in golf who still believed in Phil Mickelson. The last person who was willing to defend him. The last person who remembered the young kid from Arizona State and still believed that kid was in there somewhere. And now that person is gone. So where does Phil go from here? The answer is not encouraging. If LIV Golf collapses as expected, Phil will be a free agent with nowhere to go. The PGA Tour will not welcome him back with open arms. He would need to serve at least a one-year suspension and pay massive fines just to be considered. And even then, the younger players do not want him there. They have moved on. The tour has moved on. There is the Champions Tour for players over 50. Phil turned 56 in 2026, but the Champions Tour has its own rules and its own membership requirements, and the PGA Tour still controls much of its infrastructure. If they do not want Phil playing on the Champions Tour, they can make that very difficult. Golf commentators have been blunt about his future. Rex Hoggard, a longtime writer for Golf Channel, said, "I do not know how he recovers from this." On Jim Rome's show, Trey Wingo made an even more devastating prediction. "I can guarantee you one thing. There is one person you will never see on the PGA Tour in any official capacity again, and that person is Phil Mickelson." Think about that for a moment. A man who won 6 majors, a man who completed the career Grand Slam, a man who was once the most popular player in the game, and now he cannot get a single invitation to play. The same tournaments that once begged him to show up now pretend he does not exist. It is a tragic end to a legendary career, but it is also an avoidable one. Every step of this journey, the LIV move, the public outbursts, the personal mistakes, was a choice. Phil made those choices. He ignored the warnings. He pushed away the people who loved him. And now he stands alone. If you made it this far, thank you. And if you want more golf stories that tell the real truth, hit subscribe right now. This channel is for fans who want the full story, not the headlines, but the real story. In golf, you can always recover from a bad shot. You can hit a bad drive and still save par. You can 3-putt a green and still shoot under par. The game gives you chances. It always does. But there is one thing golf cannot fix. It cannot fix the consequences of ignoring the people who care about you the most. Steve Loy gave Phil a warning that could have saved his career. He told him the truth when nobody else would, and Phil threw that warning away. He convinced himself that he knew better, that the money mattered more, that the fame would protect him. He was wrong. Now the warning sits in the past like a ghost. Every time Phil looks back at what he had, the respect, the admiration, the loyalty of people like Steve Loy, he will remember the conversation in that private meeting. He will remember the words, "If you do this, you will lose everything." And he will know, deep down, that he was warned. Loy did not leave because he stopped caring. He left because he could not watch Phil destroy himself anymore. That is the cruelest part of this whole story. The man who walked away was the same man who believed in Phil the longest. And in the end, believing in Phil became too painful to continue. Phil Mickelson is still alive. He is still breathing. He still has a swing that once made the world gasp. But the game that made him a legend does not want him anymore. The sponsors do not want him. The fans do not want him. And now, even the people who loved him the most have let him go. That is the real story. Not the contract, not the Saudi money, not the interviews or the public fights. The real story is about a man who had everything and threw it away because he refused to listen. He refused to hear the warning, and when the warning came true, he had nobody left to blame but himself. In the end, golf gives you what you earn. It rewards skill, it rewards discipline, it rewards humility, and it punishes arrogance. Phil Mickelson's talent earned him a place in history, but his arrogance earned him this moment. Alone, unwanted, and surrounded by the silence of all the people he pushed away. Steve Loy said it best. "I warned him." Those 3 words are not just a quote. They are the epitaph of a career that could have been so much more. A career that was, for so long, so beautiful to watch. And a career that ended not with a victory, but with a whisper. The lesson is simple but brutal. You can hit a bad shot. You can lose a tournament. You can have a bad year. Those things happen to everyone. But when you stop listening to the people who love you, you lose something you can never get back. you lose yourself. Phil Mickelson learned that lesson the hardest way possible. And now, the entire golf world is watching to see if there is anything left to save. Drop a like if this story hit you the way it hit me, and subscribe, because there is always more to the story, and I will be here to tell it.